see the support of such an incredibly large and powerful company back your lives as LGBT students. So I guess I should have a clicker. Someone have a clicker for me for my slide? Oh, is this it right here? Okay, perfect. I'm just going to start. This is like a little assemblage of me in high school. It's kind of embarrassing for me to show these things, but for many of you in this room, they probably ring really close to home. So there was like a newspaper clipping when me and my doubles partner playing the #1 varsity team like saved one of our big wins for the season. I played tennis. That's one of my 3 varsity tennis letters. Those are a bunch of tennis trophies I accumulated growing up. My childhood bedroom, incidentally, 20 years later, still actually has the trophies there, like in that same position. And that's my junior year tennis photo, actually. And I kind of show them all to you because the journey for Fearless actually begins in high school for myself. I was a closet athlete, and at the time I didn't know, or I had suspected I was part of the LGBT community, but it was so hard for me to face and really difficult. As Steph mentioned before, this summer I published the work into a big photo book here. And it became a memoir of many sorts because I realized that my journey to create the project was really an exploration of my own self and my own background. And so I'm just going to read really briefly, actually I'll say that in a little bit. That's my junior tennis team. And part of the reason why I wanted to show you this photograph is because the one moment when I was on the tennis team that really stood out to me was when I was a freshman. There was a senior on the team who had come out. And it was such a horrific experience for him because this was in the mid-1990s. And I remember distinctly one of my teammates actually making a series of very derogatory remarks. And probably what I'm going to say is really offensive, but I think I actually can still remember it being said. But I'm so glad that faggot isn't on our team anymore because he probably has AIDS anyways. Wow. And this is the stuff that I heard as a 14-year-old and processed, as somebody who was very closeted at the time. And that person was voted captain actually before he came out and chose later on to leave the team because of all the horrific things that he felt that he was perceiving. I mean, I don't know if any of us have actually said this to him directly, but I think a lot of you know what it's like to have whispers behind your back, or people say things behind you. You know that they're talking about you, but they're not saying it directly to your face. So this is part of the book, and I'm just going to read just a little excerpt. It'll take like maybe 2 minutes. One of the hardest parts about discovering a gay sexual orientation as a young person is realizing that you can't say anything about it. It creates this incredible disconnect with reality and emotion, and you quickly learn to hide any discernible giveaway to whom you find attractive. Unfortunately, this coping strategy makes you less human, and the toll that this takes is sometimes irreversible. There are 2 moments in my coming out process when I considered suicide. One was early, as a young teenager in junior high right before high school. The second was in college, after I'd come out. Tennis got me through the first period, while photography got me through the second. As a 13-year-old, I knew I was different than most others around me in terms of not being straight. And these thoughts began to affect my emotional health as I sank into deep bouts of depression. I didn't share any of this with anyone, nor was I ever prescribed medication or a therapist. But what kept me from becoming deeply suicidal was the daily ritual of being on a tennis court and hitting a ball over and over. It was my escape. By proving myself in sports, I buried any thoughts of being attracted to other guys and proved my masculinity. Also, the constant exercise just kept my mind off of things, and I learned how to quickly disassociate myself with anything that was quote-unquote gay. One of these casualties is my first name, Jeffrey. Growing up, most people referred to me as Jeffrey, and only occasionally as Jeff. Yet at the end of junior high, I remember reading an article somewhere about a forthcoming movie that was to be released sometime in 1995, where the main character was an openly gay man named and titled Jeffrey. My heart instantly started racing, thinking it's even the exact same spelling as my name. Oops, sorry. spelling as my name, it's Jeffrey, and not Jeffrey D-R-Y, or Jeffrey with the G. This was a crisis, as I was about to start high school and was worried about any sort of association with this movie and anything gay. I started to insist on only being referred to as Jeff. I filled out my high school enrollment paperwork as Jeff Sheng, and that name has stuck with me ever since. Today, only my parents call me Jeffrey, and just the most official documents have my actual birth name. Everyone else now just calls me Jeff, not knowing why I purposely decided to stick with this name. So that's just part of the book. And for me, making this book was a real exploration of just my own journey. This photograph here is actually an image of my first boyfriend in college. We were 18 when we met, and we're both freshmen at Harvard. I had buried myself into school, actually, as well as tennis in high school. I did really well, and I got an offer from Harvard to go to school there for my undergraduate degree. And we met at the end of our freshman year. It turns out he was actually a water polo player on the Harvard team. And we were both, at the time, very deeply closeted. And but when we met, I just started photography. I kind of actually started photography as a replacement for tennis. I quit playing competitively in school basically after my junior year, as I was beating the coming out process. Like, I had tried to come out my senior year of high school and I just couldn't. I mean, I think I just froze and didn't know who to actually come out to, because you kind of make all these different decisions. Like, you're worried about your parents, you know, what they will think, and whether or not you might be kicked out of your own home, or you'd be a big disappointment to them. You worry about your friends at school because of teasing or bullying. And so in the end, I just couldn't make up my mind, like, who was the safest person, because at the time there wasn't anyone really that I felt was that safe. And in college, part of the reason why I decided to go to Harvard instead of a school closer to home like UCLA or Berkeley, where my parents actually wanted me to go, was really because I wanted to get away. You know, going 3,000 miles away from Southern California, where I grew up, was such a wonderful opportunity for me just to get the space to be who I was. And really, that's what I did. You know, at the end of my freshman year, when Mike and I met, you know, it just became this kind of whirlwind relationship. We spent all summer together. It turns out he was from Southern California as well. And you know, I started taking photographs of everything, like our relationship. It was kind of a really weird thing for me. Photography also became this coping mechanism. It replaced tennis, as I mentioned before. And part of it was because the camera could show me something that was beautiful. Because at the time, everyone was saying how horrible being gay was, and that, you know, you were going to hell, or you were a disgusting person, or that what you were doing was ugly or horrifying. And the photographs I was taking were just curiously beautiful, you know, and that's actually how I became a photographer in the first place. I was very lucky that my advisors at Harvard, I took a photography course totally on a whim, and it turned out that the head photography professor at Harvard, he had a stepson who was 13, who had just come out, and so he had become this sort of quintessential PFLAG parent, even though he was this old, like, older British photographer who was straight and just didn't really know how to really be an ally very well. And so when I started showing him all these photographs that I was taking of this relationship I was in, he threw all his weight of support behind me and said, you know, you really should major in photography and filmmaking, because it's something that you could do really well, and also you could make a difference in. At the end of, actually at the beginning of our sophomore year, Mike actually broke up with me, and a big reason for this is, you know, we've been going out for 5 or 6 months, and he was coming out much more slowly than I was, I think. I was much more comfortable with myself, and even though I was photographing him in this relationship of ours, when we came back to school from the summer, he suddenly found himself, you know, with his friends from the water polo team. And it, you know, was kind of really difficult suddenly to be thrown back into the closet with somebody else you really loved and cared about. And I remember going to water polo games, having to actually even say that I didn't know him. I would just be going there to see another one of my friends on the water polo team, because he was so scared that if they made an association, it would out him on the team. It was from this sort of experience that I decided to kind of focus my years after graduating on a photo project of documenting out LGBTQ athletes. I began the project in 2003, and really what it was my undergraduate photography professor at Harvard said, I know you really want to work on this project. Why don't you be my teaching assistant for a year and use the space at school in a dark room and see what you can do. Maybe it'll be like a portfolio of 15 athletes. And I started just photographing athletes that I knew through social networks that I had already. The previous photograph is actually the brother of the sister of the teammate of my roommate's sister or something. It was some really convoluted chain of who knew who. And he trusted me enough to kind of come to Brown every weekend to photograph him. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I was 22, and I just sort of thought I'm going to photograph you and create something from it. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do in life, to be honest. I think that photography was also this really weird thing, which gave me a chance to explore my own creativity, be who I was. And what I found so powerful was that I could show people photographs of something and it would affect them. And I'm a really firm believer of one-to-one kind of change, where I think a lot of us think that change happens only in these large-scale you have to be some famous person to actually change the world. And really, I've always approached change as in, you show someone a photograph like this of an out, gay athlete, and what you can do with just that. It was powerful for me. Ella was somebody on the crew team at Harvard, and I photographed her every weekend. And what wound up happening was that the two of them really actually didn't like to be photographed. They would kind of make faces at me and look kind of funny. And I decided that I would make them work out, because having them work out was going to be a way for them to relax a bit and not actually be conscious of the fact that I was in front of them taking pictures of them. And what wound up happening was, in between these workouts, I realized, wow, they really look like athletes, because they're sweaty and they're tired, and they probably aren't paying any more attention to me. And so basically, through the help of my friends, and also I reached out to all these LGBT organizations. PFLAG in Boston actually helped me find Greg, who was the captain of his high school soccer team, Kasha. And I would save up all my money. I worked part-time at an Apple store, actually, just to save up extra money to be able to spend on flights to photograph them. Andrea filed a lawsuit against the University of Florida for discrimination, because she discovered that after she had come out publicly that her time on the team, her playing time decreased significantly, and the coach at the University of Florida made it a point to kind of do very religious activities around the team, and also ask teammates specifically if she was a lesbian. And when someone had said she was, she discovered immediately her playing time dropped. So the National Center for Lesbian Rights actually brought my attention to Andrea, because they were working with her on a lawsuit to file against the school. This will come up later, actually, and I'll tell you more about that. Lauren was the first athlete of color I photographed, and for me, I was trained as a photographer, and I was not trained as a sociologist, even though currently now I'm actually in a PhD program in sociology at Stanford. But at the time, I wasn't aware of race or gender or sexual orientation, really. I mean, I hadn't taken a gender course as an undergrad or a class on race or ethnicity. And it really opened my eyes when Lauren was maybe the 10th athlete I photographed, and she began to share a lot of her own struggles, both as an out lesbian, but also as somebody who identified as Black. And it was weird for me, because I had never really thought about my own race at that time. But my own identification now as a person of color is really significant in the way that, as the project kind of continued, I slowly began to notice, wow, a lot of the athletes were white, and it dawned on me that part of the reason was, part of it was there was a privilege in coming out and being visible, and I wasn't really quite sure how to respond to this, because I would put a call out for athletes, and there would only be a certain demographic that was responding. And so I began to kind of be more conscious of the fact that whenever I was at a school or talking about the work or reaching out to athletes, to really be mindful of the fact that the project was about inclusivity, and that if you didn't see yourself there, to step up, and I wanted you to step up to be in it. And what wound up actually happening is I started to exhibit the work, at different colleges and high schools. And I'm actually just going to go through a series of slides to kind of just show you some more pictures before I get to some pictures of the exhibitions. But this will just give you an idea. I'm not going to be able to show all 200 some athletes, because that's how many athletes are in the project today. But this just gives you an idea of kind of a sample of the first maybe 5 years of the project and what the images look like. I would always ask the athlete to pick a location that they were comfortable with, wear something that they were, you know, that they wanted to be photographed in. This is Robbie, the first transgender athlete I photographed. And he shared a terrible story with me that right after the photo shoot about being kicked out of his home, even though his parents were okay with his lesbian identity a year before, after coming out as trans, it was just way too much for the parents to deal with, and just said, you know, that's a line that we can't come to agreement on. And so I began to also realize that almost all the stories before of out lesbian, gay, or bisexual athletes were very positive stories. You know, it was like, I'm the captain of the soccer team in my high school and everyone loves me, versus like, now my parents are kicking me out of my house because I'm trans. And that was one of the first trans individuals too that I actually befriended. You know, it's kind of weird for me to say that now as someone who's a really staunch advocate of trans rights. And you know, I had a lot of fun doing the project. It was so exciting to show up at people's doors and be like, hey, let's go on a photo shoot together, thanks for volunteering. No one ever, I mean, I covered all the costs out of my own pocket. I slept on floors of athletes in their dorm rooms, and couches in their guest rooms, or things like that. And it was just so wonderful for me to see these people who could do something that I could never be. You know, I could never have come out as an out athlete in high school. And when I finally did come out in college, I wasn't playing competitive sports anymore. That's probably like the most like pinup photo I've actually taken. And you know, what's funny is I don't even, like with the athletes who don't have their shirts on, I never ask them to do that, and it's kind of interesting to see that, like, and I think, and I've thought a lot about this, and I think that one of the powerful things about the camera is it lets you see your own beauty. And I think that what was powerful for me to see happen was when I showed people the photographs of them, and they were so blown away by what they, I'm sure, saw was something that they might not have seen fully before. Something similar to what I said earlier about, you know, when you can't see your own beauty and having someone else show it to you. You know, I'm always terrified when I show these athletes their photographs because I really want them to like it and not be scared of it. So just. And what was really nice too is I got to photograph more, you know, baseball players than football players, sports, these sort of masculine sports that people thought like, oh, you'll never find someone to photograph. That's what they told me when I started the project. And it turned out that I actually did have a lot of athletes from those sports. So I'm gonna now go to these exhibitions I did. So with this project, I suddenly realized that it wasn't enough for me to just have this photo project. In 2006, the University of Florida, at that time, their queer group said, you know, we know you came to campus 2 years ago to photograph Andrew Zimbardi. Have you ever thought about exhibiting work on any campus before? And you know, I was in an MFA program, a Master of Fine Arts program, and exhibiting your work meant putting it in a museum, you know, putting it in a gallery, putting it somewhere kind of swanky and fabulous, and having all these art world people see it. And for me, I decided that it wasn't the right place for these pictures. And it turns out that the gallery was actually booked for the time they wanted me to do the show, and instead what we decided to do, you know, I actually asked, like, can I exhibit the work in the hallway? Like, who goes to that hallway? And it turned out that thousands of University of Florida students actually walk through that hallway, including athletes, right? So everybody, I said, that's a perfect space to do it. And I basically set up the show kind of like this, just pinned up photographs on the wall, and sure enough, you know, I would watch people like walk by, and they would be floored by what they were seeing. So I repeated this at Oberlin College, and then I did this exhibition at the University of Florida, University of Pennsylvania, so I should hopefully play.
Where's Marion?
Plays. It might not play. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't play. Okay. There was a video that showed the gallery space. Hopefully the next one will play. This was at Phillips Exeter Academy because, you know, different high schools started asking me to do the shows. Manual Arts High School is a charter school in South Central Los Angeles. So they range between private schools and actually somewhat public schools. For this exhibition, we actually just put things in the behind glass cases in the locker area. Atherton, Athenian High School in the Bay Area. This was the first international show I did. It was at the International LGBT Human Rights Conference. And this was so awesome because it was just with like thousands of these people from all over the world who were seeing this in Copenhagen. And I never thought, to be honest, when I started the project, this is where it would be seen. But as word of mouth spread and people started talking about the project, that's kind of what happened is they asked me to exhibit it. And one of the places was Nike. And I was gonna, there we go, the video works, right? Okay, so this is just like across the courtyard in the Mia Hamm building. This was 5 years ago. And for me, even though I've done some amazing shows everywhere, this is still, for me, one of the most powerful exhibitions that I've done. And I watched this video with amazement because I remember showing up on campus and the LGBT Friends and Network group from Nike had these Fearless shirts printed for my exhibit here. And I just thought that was the most awesome thing, that a company like Nike would put their weight behind my work. And this is just kind of right outside one of their main dining halls. And so you have different employees who walk by. Mark Parker, the CEO, came to my artist talk that day, sat there for an hour. I mean, this person makes like $1 bajillion an hour. Like, I don't know how much he makes, but like for him to come by and sit down with me for an hour and listen to my story, listen to what I was doing to try to decrease LGBT bias in sports was just so powerful to have here. And and since then, as I mentioned, I've been a real supporter and active participant in the work that Nike's been doing. I'm currently the co-chair of the LGBT Sports Coalition and helping plan all of our events for next year. So if any of you want to be more involved with that, come find me and talk to me. So that's enough of Mia Hamm's building. So this was a show I just did like 2 weeks ago, actually, in Brooklyn, New York for Photoville. It was the first major show I did in the New York area. You could just see kind of how many more athletes are in the project. And it still amazes me today to kind of see, I will set up an exhibition like this and just be floored because, these are all people your age, basically, who have come out and been a force to be reckoned with on their own sports teams, telling their own stories and being who they are despite possible discrimination. And to be able to meet all of them, spend time with them, and photograph them has been such a privilege of myself. This is just a little bit of an excerpt of the book that I showed earlier that I was reading from. Part of the book has this timeline. It's really beautiful. It starts with this photograph of Bill Tillman, who was outed. He was basically the Roger Federer of his day, and he was outed like 10 years later after his tennis career, and he basically became completely vilified in the media because of it. And so that's actually the first timeline event. And throughout this book, it's a 314-page book, really tracking all these different moments in LGBT sports history. There's quotes from famous people, athletes mostly. This is Martina Navratilova's famous quote. And then, this is my story again. Like I sort of wove it through the pages along with the photographs of the athletes. The book was published and designed by Isometric Studio, an independent design book publishing agency in Brooklyn, New York. And they just did such a great job in making the images of the athletes look beautiful in a book format. One of the things we had to do was we sort of altered the sizing of all the athletes. And one of the powerful things for me to think about as I was creating this book was the project actually spanned 13 years. And so I was really able to capture the kind of change that happened in LGBT sports. This is the quote by Michael Sam. And what's really ironic about it is that when I first thought of doing a book, this was in 2012, I did a Kickstarter drive. Danny in the room helped support the Kickstarter drive. There are other people who pitched in money, and we raised over $50,000 to be able to publish this book independently without a major publisher backing it, which was something that I didn't want. Because for me, it was sharing these stories. I would approach publishers and they would say, well, what about telling the stories about like famous athletes or Olympic athletes? Could you do that? And none of them understood the idea that I was trying to tell the stories of just everyday student athletes who, to me, were almost just as, if not more powerful than these sort of famous people. One of the stories that I got to share was Jordan Vega at Whittier College writing about his teammate Alyssa Cialaris, who actually, Alyssa, this photo is sideways because in the book we have these full spread pages on some of the athletes. She mysteriously passed away a few months after I did the photo shoot, which was actually kind of traumatic on my end because I wasn't really quite sure how to handle that. But I'm really glad that in the end her parents and I made contact and they really supported the book endeavor, which was just powerful for me. Lauren, who was just up here on panels in the book, I was able to travel to the University of Arizona to photograph her, and she shares her story in the book. And then also Connor. I think I came and visited Connor, who was living at Willamette University, just like 2 hours out of here, and photographed him last year. A real pleasure for me also was having Jason Collins, the first out actively playing basketball player in the professional NBA leagues, write the afterword. And Jason was super nice. Nike actually introduced me to Jason. They invited me to come to a dinner in Los Angeles one evening, and Jason Collins was there. And they were like, we know you really want to meet him. This was right after he came out. And slowly we got to know each other, become friends. And I pitched, could you write the afterword for this book? And he didn't blink at all. He said, sure, when do you need it by? And when I got the afterword for him, it was short. It was like 500-600 words, but I was really struck by how much it was not about him, but it was about these athletes. He sort of wrote about his own coming out and how hard it was and how he was closeted in high school, and celebrates this idea that here are these young people doing something he could never do. And it was just and I didn't tell him to write it. He wrote about his crush in high school as well, trying to resonate with the kind of experiences young people go through. There's nothing more beautiful than a person living their authentic life. And he actually went to Harvard Westlake as high school and got the archivist to dig out photographs of him and his brother from high school that had never been published before. And they had him scanned to me for the book itself. So I really have to thank him. He did everything completely for free. So the book itself, as I actually showed you one. There's actually 8 different covers for the book. And part of the reason for that was, as somebody really mindful of diversity, this was the first kind of iconic cover we created. It's this classic kind of football player playing, on the cover like this. But as somebody who identifies as a person of color and recognizing the importance of having equal representation, we actually decided to come up with 8 different covers. And each cover actually has a different color of the original 1978 spine of the LGBT pride flag created in 1978 by Gilbert Baker. So when you put all 8 books together, you form this really beautiful rainbow that you can see here. And each of the athletes, it's one of the really wonderful thing for me was seeing how beautiful the books were together, even though the inside of the book is all the same, but having just a different face. And so that athletes themselves could feel like they could find maybe someone close to them that they identified with, and they could see themselves in. And so we have Avery, who played hockey for Amherst, Tanner, a high school football player, Lee Pang, who ran track in high school, Mason, who I'm talking about a little bit later, but also an openly trans athlete on their high school cross-country team, Matt Dooley, who is a D1 superstar tennis player at Notre Dame, Josh Dixon over here, who identifies as multiracial and is also trying out for the Olympics for 2016 and was a gymnast at Stanford. And then Derek Shell, a basketball player who went to a very religious school and sort of had to fight kind of religious oppression at Hillsdale College. And Alyssa that I talked to you about earlier. And so this is just, I'm going to share one cover. Mason, who I met Mason when they were 15 years old in Denver, in the Denver suburbs, and Mason was just, Mason had run on girls cross-country team freshman year, and then petitioned to run on the boys cross-country team. I'm using slightly gender neutral like they and them because I think the pronouns that Mason preferred were kind of shifting at the time that we did the photo shoot, and so I don't want to mispronounce somebody. But one of the fascinating things for Mason was just how brave they were in being 16 years old and petitioning to run on the team that they felt most comfortable on in terms of their gender identification. So I'm just sort of going to end my talk by going back to this opening slide, me in high school, because a lot of you are where I am now today. I mean, back then, you're here where I'm back then. And you know, I think all of us have our own challenges in life, and all of us have our own paths to take. But what I really want to challenge all of you to do is think about the change that you can do, even if it's just at your own school or within your own circle of friends or on your team. You know, I would have never predicted that this photo was taken 19 years ago, that I would be standing in front of a room today of high school students speaking about my own experience in high school where I failed to come out and failed to protect somebody else in their coming out process, to come around and eventually find my own path to make right a wrong and be able to share my own story. This is the final photograph of an athlete in Fearless, and it's a self-portrait I did on the same tennis court that I grew up on, in the same shirt, incidentally, that I found in my high school bedroom closet. And I just decided to end the book with that portrait because for me it was really a project about self-exploration, about me finding my own self, and finally being proud of who I am. So quickly, we have a book for every school. So if actually we could have an adult from each school come to the slides and they will get a book. I have bookmarks for all of you. Sorry, but we wanted each school to have a book, and I've got a bookmark that Steph will pass out. And we're gonna, while this is quietly going on, we're doing Q&A. Right? Is that correct?
Me again. Wait. We're doing bookmarks now? Okay.
Just know that we've got a book for each adult for going back to their school so that we can make sure every school has one. Yeah. So we're going to do Q&A.
Here I am.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One more time for Jeff. So listen, we're, as you know, on a tight schedule today. So I'm going to ask people. Here's my one stipulation. If you have asked a question already, I'd love it if we made some room for folks who haven't yet asked questions. Cool?
Mason asks
cool?
these questions.
Cool. So let's try and give some room to those folks, all right? Yes, Rebecca?
So, one administrator for a school, you can make your way up to this side or to that side. We'll be giving out books, so you can do it during Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, just quietly, please. Okay, who's got questions?
Did you have
Anyone? Questions? And I'm just going to remind you that Connor and Lauren are both here, and Connor is raising his hand, people.
Raise the first.
Connor and Lauren are both in the book. And Connor has a question. I can't believe this. Yes, Connor.
Hi, Jeff. Long time fan. First time question.
Make it brief.
What's next for you? Do you have any other projects planned for next, or are you just kind of fearless? Or are you?
I'm still photographing Fearless because athletes keep. They ask, and it's hard for me to say no. And so if I'm in an area and I want to photograph them, also one thing I forgot to mention is I never show up at a photo shoot and turn anyone down. If you're not whatever enough to be in the project, it's not something I've ever believed in. So I always try to photograph as many people as I can, and there's no audition process, if you were wondering that. Other projects, I did a big project on Don't Ask, Don't Tell about LGBT positive people in the military due to government policies, and some of you might have seen that in the media. A current project that I'm really working on is I'm starting this project. I've only done 4 photo shoots on it, and there have been kind of trial shoots, but I've been photographing survivors of suicide, actually, young adults who at one point had tried to go through suicide, and photographing them in spaces of their teenage or childhood years. That's been really emotionally hard for both myself and the people involved. But I'm still working on it. But that's something that's a little more distant at the moment. It might take me 5 years to finish because of how heavy the themes are with that. But something I would work on.
Anybody else? Who else got questions?
They're pointing at you, but I don't see you raising your hand, so I'm not gonna call on you
I have a
until
question, but-
you have a question, Lexi. Okay.
Huh. Now I saw.
Keep it short.
So this
Keep
is
it short.
mine. Okay. Keep it short, Lex. I said, what made you come out and who did you come out to first?
Gosh, I came out to my college roommates first. And I think part of it was I wanted to be in love and have someone love me authentically in a way that I felt aligned most with my sexual orientation. And I think that was really important for me. And so that's one of the major reasons why I came out, is because I was lonely. I was kind of sad and seeing kind of all these straight people in these really wonderful romantic relationships, but and also seeing some friends I had made in college who were openly gay or lesbian or bisexual come out as well and find relationships was really powerful for me to see.
Do I have another question? I have a question.
Yeah.
Hey, is there gonna be a Where Are They Now?
I'm kind of doing a blog soon on following up with all the athletes who were photographed from before and everything, so that's going to be done online probably, but yeah, Where Are They Now? I'm really happy with the book, so I don't think I'm ever going to redo the book. It's just
We'll have Fearless 2.
it's good the way it is now, and it took 3 years to make this. So